in the high desert in the great American Southwest.
Welcome to Coast AM. John, welcome to the program. It's good to have you with us. You're with us.
Welcome back to Coast PM, where it's all conspiracy all the time. The very unofficial yet number one Coast AM podcast, where two brothers talk about Coast to Coast episodes. My name is Paul. I am the guy that listens to Coast.
Hey, and I'm Chris. I'm the Mel Gibson to your Danny Glover with a whole lot less anti-Semitism.
That was not what I was expecting. No, but I like it.
You liked it? All right,
I liked it, especially the nod to Mel Gibson's anti-Semitism, which is world-renowned.
World-renowned anti-Semite Mel Gibson. But can the man make one hell of a movie?
He can definitely make a movie, man. You know, Braveheart, that scene in Braveheart where he does this little speech is still iconic.
4th of July, dude, The Patriot, one of the best Revolutionary War movies of all time.
Also amazing. He's got some good ones. And then he went Apocalypto, which was not quite as fun. I didn't enjoy that one.
Didn't see that.
It was mainly just gore.
Well, and he wasn't in that, right? He just directed it. So
yeah, he was.
I
just
will say, actor Mel Gibson still at the top of the game.
Yeah, and I mean all the Lethal Weapons 1 through 4, and then the Always Sunny 5, 6, 7, and 8 were also fantastic.
Right, exactly.
Well, Chris, we got a doozy of an episode. I know we have not talked much about cryptids. Cryptids.
So wait, give me what's a rough definition of what a cryptid is?
It's those mystical creatures out there, right? Like a Mothman or a Loch Ness monster, for instance.
Okay, those are all cryptids.
All cryptids. And
Chupacabra.
Great one. Today we're talking about one of, I think, our favorites that we grew up, watching, History Channel, Discovery Channel specials about Bigfoot, dude. Bigfoot.
Yes, the Pacific Northwest's very large mammalian. He's an ape, right? Considered to be an ape.
By many is considered to be an ape. It depends who you're talking to, which Bigfootologist you're speaking with, but a lot of folks consider him some sort of like missing link,
bridging humanity back to our forebears.
Yeah, which is pretty fun. And specifically today we are going to be listening to another George Knapp interview. George Knapp, Coast to Coast AM, kind of tier 2 host, I'd say.
My God, dude, George Knapp has gotten more love than Art Bell has.
I don't know, man. He's just been putting out good episodes lately.
Just great episodes.
Yeah, this is going to be an episode from June of 2022 where he interviews Tobe Johnson and Brett Eichenberger, who created the film A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, which is about Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest.
Always got to add like a revealed or finding or discovered.
You got it, man.
When you're talking about these things, right?
Reel them in. You got to reel the people in. And here's the thing about these two guys, man. These are the most based Bigfoot researchers I've ever heard.
So a lot of Pepe the Frogs.
No Pepe the Frogs,
Pepe the Frogs.
They're just very grounded in reality, which is very interesting. So we're going to kind of listen to their view of Bigfoot, but they take a more historical perspective, right? So they look at what Native American traditions said, what some of the early settlers said in the region about Bigfoot, and then also interviewed locals who had seen Bigfoot more recently.
I like that.
Yeah, which is pretty fun. I really enjoyed listening to this because, I mean, Chris, you've seen the specials that they have on TV where it's some idiot out there. It's a 3-hour long show and they never find a single thing.
The one that I really enjoyed recently was that Hulu documentary about Bigfoot. I think it was called Bigfoot.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh, man, it was really good. But it was about a guy who worked in the marijuana fields back in the early 90s in Northern California and the Bigfoot stories that he heard.
That is interesting. How much can you trust a man that works in a marijuana field, though?
Well, so he ended up becoming an investigative journalist.
Okay.
He starts off talking about a couple of the big stories that he did.
Okay.
So, I mean, that kind of gave him a little bit of credibility.
I just wasn't sure if he was, kind of getting high on his own supply out there.
Oh, that definitely seemed to be happening.
It happens to the best of us. Well, Chris, before we get into Bigfoot, which I'm really excited to jump into because these guys have an interesting perspective that I hadn't heard previously, we have to check in with our good friend Tim Banal.
Tim Boy
at the Coast to Coast AM blog.
Yes, I can't wait. Give it to me, baby.
So today's article, the headline, Ghostly Encounters Cause Students to Abandon Dormitory in India.
Whoa,
Yeah.
Indian ghosts.
Hindu ghosts.
Yeah,
I don't know specifically if they're Hindu.
Okay.
But high
they're
probability,
at least Indian.
High probability that they're both Indian and likely Hindu. So from the writer Tim Banal on the Coast to Coast AM blog, a dormitory in India may soon be vacant following a series of ghostly encounters that sparked such a panic that all of the residents of the building have decided to leave the spooky site. According to a local media report, the weird case began last month at the Kasturba Gandhi Girls Hostel when 3 separate students reported seeing an eerie apparition dressed entirely in white.
Oh, so it's probably Gandhi.
I don't know. It could be.
It's probably Mahatma Gandhi, dude.
That would be kind of cool, though. I wouldn't run away
Checking
from that
in, seeing how everything's going.
Hey, it's just finger gunning everyone. Like, what's up?
He did like the young girls. So
did he?
Yeah.
Was Gandhi a pedophile? No, don't do that.
I won't go so far to besmirch him that much, but there's definitely some strange stories around Gandhi and girls below what is deemed to be a common age.
I've been listening to too much TrueAnon recently, so I just assume everyone's being a pedophile.
Mostly everyone's a pedophile.
Yeah.
Right.
So the sight of the unsettling interloper was apparently so troubling that each of the witnesses became sick from the experience and subsequently fled the dormitory.
Wow.
Yeah. However, this was only the beginning of a situation that has left the school administrators scrambling.
Dude, Tim has the best words.
Dude, the flair he writes with is so amazing.
It's incredible.
He's talented. The day after the ghost sighting caused a commotion in the dormitory, another 2 students reported seeing the unnerving figure and falling ill after their experience. Faced with a veritable outbreak of paranormal activity in the building, school officials held a meeting with the parents of the remaining students in an effort to ease concerns over what had occurred in recent days.
My Lord. So we're at like 5 kids now. They're all, that's like semi-possession, right? When you get sick.
Yeah, honestly, it kind of is. Like when you're physically ill from the experience. That's pretty dramatic. It wasn't just I got scared. It was like I'm ill.
Yeah.
But it's also, I don't know. They could just be being ridiculous. Alas.
No.
No, not at all. It would seem that their attempt at supernatural damage control was all for naught, as administrators were informed that all 50 of the remaining residents had decided they would vacate the dormitory due to the ghostly presence, which is super, super lame. They're all running out of the building.
I would have totally done the same thing. I would have gotten the hell out of there, dude.
You bail. If everyone's getting sick from it, especially.
Dude, because listen. Let's at the least, let's say that there's no ghostly activity. All right. All these kids are getting sick. There's something wrong, like environmentally speaking, not a good sign.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you start getting out of it. If people weren't getting sick, I may have stayed to see if I could see anything.
If you saw a ghost.
Yeah.
An Indian ghost.
I really want to see a ghost. When I was in Savannah recently, I was going through the graveyards with my wife at nighttime, taking pictures of everything, trying to see if I could see a ghost.
And
I think I caught something. She doesn't think I caught anything.
No,
we are still debating it. I think I caught something, though.
We may need to post it somewhere so our listeners can take a look.
We probably should, so they can see. We'll let them decide if I saw a ghost, but I'm pretty sure I saw a ghost.
Here's what's truly horrifying about an Indian ghost, and I'm just going to go ahead and make the assumption that it is a Hindu ghost. Hindus, for the most part, believe in reincarnation, and let's just say that they're right about that. You got to be a horrible piece of crap to not even like get placed into a lesser being, where the Godhead says you don't even get to be reincarnated. Your soul has to walk the earthly realm for the rest of time, dude. That is an evil person.
That would really suck, honestly, especially if everyone else is getting reincarnated and you're trapped.
You don't even get the chance of being like, you know, put into a lower level to learn. You're trapped.
I don't know, man. That would be pretty lame.
So no wonder all these kids are getting sick.
Yeah. It's really malevolent being that you got going on there.
Terrible person. So yeah, dude. That just on that thought, I'm getting the hell out of that dormitory, dude.
Yeah. Well, back to the article. It is uncertain if the school can convince the remaining students to change their mind, or if the dormitory will ultimately wind up being vacant. Should the latter scenario unfold, however, administrators will likely have a difficult time filling up the rooms, as this is actually the second ghost scare to sweep through the building, following a similar incident that occurred at the site in 2018 and wound up making headlines throughout the country. With recent
so I guess you could say this is a problem of an Indian burial ground.
Terrible. Okay. Terrible. With recent events serving to bolster the site's reputation for being haunted, convincing new students to move into the dormitory will now undoubtedly be something of a hard sell.
Yeah, very hard.
Which I would agree with. I would probably not move in there, especially if this is the second time it's happened.
As our dear leader, President Bush, said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, you can't fool me again.
Immortal words. Immortal words. Well, that was the Coast to Coast AM blog. Another beautiful piece by Tim Banal.
Timmy Banal, dude. He's got the adjectives and adverbs to get me through any story.
He always has a new twist of phrase that just brings a smile to my face every time I read an article from him.
It's great, dude.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, we're at some point when we go to the Coast to Coast AM Expo somewhere and we're doing our live broadcast of Coast to Coast PM, we're going to have to get Timmy Banal on, get him like a bottle of whiskey or something.
Oh, that'd be a lot of fun. Just get drunk with Tim Banal and record it and see what happens.
Oh, dude, just be like, Timmy, give us your best stories.
Yeah.
Because he's got some, dude.
I'm sure he has some, man. Well, and if you pay like $200, you can have dinner with George Norrie, which is something that maybe we should do at some point.
There we go. Do you think he would do a live broadcast with us?
No, I don't. But I think we could go undercover and have dinner with him.
There you go. Yeah. We'll just record it the whole time.
Yeah. Well, are you ready to get into a little Bigfoot, Chris?
Take me into the world of the big feet, dude.
The very large feet, or Sasquatch, as they say.
Sasquatch, yes.
Either or.
Not to be confused with the Yeti.
Mm-hmm.
The Yeti is a totally different being, correct?
I believe so. I mean, the Yeti's more like white fur versus brown fur of a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot.
It's like saying a polar bear and a grizzly bear is the same thing.
I honestly think they're about as similar. It's just they're different, but kind of the same.
Right.
Big, hairy, and smelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in, Chris. So to start off, like I said, these guys start at the beginning, which is like 100,000 years ago, Native American traditions and what they used to say about Bigfoot, which was a big deal for them to actually be able to, speak with these communities and kind of get their conception of what Bigfoot is.
So they're going to like Native American reservations and like doing some one-on-one conversations, getting like the old stories.
Exactly. They were actually visiting reservations, becoming friends with tribal leaders, and then hearing what they had to say about Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, dude, I can't wait.
It's pretty cool. They were doing some cool stuff.
The native connection is where we start, because we're talking about relationships with tribes up and down the West Coast and for the most part across the United States, relationships that go back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And some of these relationships are very close. And one of the tribes that's based up in British Columbia on Vancouver Island they believe they might actually have some Sasquatch DNA in them.
Whoa.
Yeah, a little bit of Sasquatch mixing in the tribe.
Are they like particularly tall or something like that? Why? What was the belief that they actually had DNA in them?
I think it was just because they had been around him for so long and they felt a kinship to him.
Right.
I don't think there was any sort of actual physical traits, but it was more just that vibe of,
right.
You know, we are the same as this Sasquatch.
Well, and theoretically, you know, Homo sapiens and Neanderthal and all were interbreeding as well. So, I mean, if they're not that far removed from humans, it could totally be likely that we have some Bigfoot progeny walking around.
Yeah. Series finale of Battlestar Galactica.
Right. Exactly.
You know, gotta mate with the locals.
The locals. Right.
Now, an interesting thing about Bigfoot, a lot of tribes do associate Bigfoot positively, right? So they have positive experience with the Sasquatch, but some don't. And it's kind of just based on where you're located, how you feel about them or potentially how they're actually acting.
Okay.
Some of the tribes I know look at Sasquatch as kind of a mischievous cousin or a trickster. But obviously they all have different, relationships. And some of that I think depends on region. Say for instance, if you're in the Mount St. Helens area, they can be a little bit more aggressive than they might be, around the Mount Rainier area.
Well, and that totally makes sense, right? This isn't one tribe of Bigfoots. It's multiple tribes theoretically throughout the Pacific Northwest, and there would be different kind of attributes that those tribes would have.
Yeah, like different cultures internally.
Right.
Where some may be a bit more aggressive. I don't want to say warlike, because I don't think there's any evidence they're waging war, but just bigger dicks than others are.
Right. Yeah.
Versus some, which we'll get into this in a bit, which are really nice. People actually like leave them gifts out in the woods.
Oh, that's cool.
Pretty chill. Yeah. That's a fun little thing that I would like to do one day, is leave a gift for Bigfoot.
Leave a Bigfoot. What do you leave as a gift to Bigfoot? Like beef jerky?
We'll get into it.
Okay.
We'll talk through it. Now, so what we do from here is we kind of talk through some of the evidence, right? So we'll kind of go through a couple through lines of Native American history. But before we do that, one of the big things that, is shown as a proof point of Bigfoot is the Patterson-Gimlin film.
But it's still the only real great footage that exists. Why, when people say, why isn't there more? What do you tell them?
They're great at, I think, sensing people. I definitely think that they have senses that obviously humans don't have. I think that they might be able to sense the frequency of cameras. They might be able to hear, the mechanism.
So the only real video of Bigfoot that we have is the Patterson-Gimlin film, which George Knapp was referring to there. And it is a 59-second long film that was shot on 8mm camera in Orleans, California in 1967.
This is the classic Bigfoot film of the Bigfoot crossing like the riverbed and looks back at the camera for a second.
Yes, it's that classic, the still shot that you usually see of it, like the arms splayed out.
Yeah, right.
That is from that film, and it's the only real film of Bigfoot that we have that hasn't been proven to be a fake.
That I thought it has been proven to be a hoax.
No, not according to Knapp, Tobe, and Brett. This is one that they put up a lot of money to try and prove it to be a hoax, and basically no one has been able to demonstrate that it is a hoax based on the technology that was available at the time for creating costumes.
In 5th grade, I had to do a project proving that it was a hoax. I had read somewhere that somebody saw like a glint of a belt or something like that. So that I must have been passing around conspiracy then.
It was probably fake news created by the government to cover up Bigfoot that you were passing around, Chris.
Yeah.
I believe they refer to that as being a useful idiot, potentially.
I'm definitely a useful idiot. That is, it's without a doubt. Okay. All right. So I need more.
Yeah, so that's a very well respected film that is still considered to be an actual shot of a Bigfoot in the Bigfoot research community.
That's good to know, dude. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So with these guys, Toby or Tobe as he goes by, and Brett,
Tobe,
who sound like total bros.
Yeah.
George Knapp is a big Bigfoot guy, and he keeps trying to get them to like say like there's all this evidence for Bigfoot, and they just are not giving him anything,
they're not going to do it,
which was really funny to listen to. So here's a little clip where they discuss how much evidence there is to prove Bigfoot exists.
How much solid evidence do we have, and what can we prove for sure?
You know, we don't have a lot of solid evidence.
Just
we don't have any evidence.
And as you're listening to this interview, it's clearly not what Knapp wants to hear. So he starts leading them more and more, where he's like, oh, well, what about footprints? That's great evidence. Do you agree? And then that way they're like, oh, yeah, we do agree.
Yeah.
It's just very funny. These guys are like not necessarily playing into it as much as Knapp wants them to.
I mean, they're really more like cultural ethnologists than Bigfoot people, right? It's more about the story of Bigfoot, the myth of Bigfoot, and kind of what it means in the general scheme of things than like actually having Bigfoot come to you or whatever.
Yeah, they really are, especially with this film that they made, A Flash of Beauty. Now, they are coming out with another movie or actively working on another movie called Paranormal Bigfoot, where I think they're going to get into some of the more wild stuff. Okay. But I don't necessarily think that they believe it based on what's, or I guess how they present the information in this episode. This is more, like I said, they're very based in a lot of how they're handling things right now. It's pretty interesting. But that said, footprints are pretty cool, Chris.
Footprints are cool.
There's, and Dr. Meldrum talks about how the footprint is some of the best evidence that we have because of the way that the foot is shaped. You know, in order to fake that, you would have to have a pretty advanced knowledge of, you know, a primate foot and how that foot would work.
So basically, there are a lot of footprints that have been found, and they have been proven to be scientifically accurate depictions of a foot. Right. So it's not like someone just made a cardboard cutout and just shoved it into the ground or something like that. It's like, no, this is actually how a foot would be working. This is how the bones would be structured. It's just really big. And that's the part where, you know, obviously there are a lot of hoaxes and they do talk about that, but they are disproven quickly. But it's those footprints that are anatomically accurate, just way bigger than anything else that we know exists. That are the best piece of evidence that they can really find.
Very interesting. So like the gate is correct. How much pressure would be put into mud or whatever it is that they make the cast in. All of those things, people look at it and they're like, yeah, if you did have an 8-foot creature that weighed 400 or 500 pounds, this is how they would walk. This is how their footprint would look.
Yeah, and this is how deep the print would be if it weighed this much, like you said. So that way it's not just like this light footprint. It's like, no, this is shoved into the mud. You need a ton of pressure to actually make this happen.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And it's one of those things where they're found all over the place in really remote locations that are off the beaten path. So it's like, what are these doing here?
Yeah.
And what made them. So that's one of the things that Knapp then gets into, right? And he's a bit incredulous about it. He's like, why would anyone bother faking this? And it doesn't make any sense.
Tobe, the prints that get to me the most are ones that you find in the middle of nowhere, not on some path where road workers are bound to see it, but somewhere up on the top of a mountain ridge where nobody ever climbs, and there they are, out in the middle of nowhere. If somebody's trying to prank people, that wouldn't be the place to put them, would they?
Well, you know, I'm always surprised at what people will do.
That's what I was going to say. It was like, man, people will do. I mean, just look at that TikTok video that we saw with the baby, right? Like, people will do anything if they think it's going to give them like a modicum of media attention.
The clout chasing is brutal.
Yeah, clout chasing. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah. And that's another great example of these guys not giving Knapp what he wants, because he's like, it wouldn't make any sense to do that. And the guys are like, no, you know, people are weird, man. I could see it happening, which I could also see it happening, you know?
Well, you know, for me, the one that I always think of is crop circles. And people are being like, why would anyone do this to their own field? And it's like, because they're like marginally crazy.
Yeah. Or they're just weird.
They're just strange. And
Well,
they're just,
yeah.
you know, they in some way, they probably think that they're helping the alien community, right? Where it's like, oh, if I make this will get people talking and there'll be more likelihood that aliens do come. You know, it's like, you know, who's to say, you know?
Or they're just having, you know, they could just be having fun. It's like that. There was that guy that put the obelisk in the middle of that desert canyon.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it was there for years before anyone found it. And then finally people found it. We're like, oh my, what is this obelisk? What's it doing here? And it was just some artist who had put it out there for like 5 years prior. They had the satellite footage from Google Earth showing it had been there for a super long time.
Right.
It was just, you know, we just put it there and didn't say anything. And then finally someone stumbled into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are just strange, but they do go ahead. They do throw Knapp a little bit of a bone because he's clearly fishing for them to get in on this.
Knapp is just like, give me a bone, guys. We're coast to coast AM.
Police. I know what my listeners want.
They want you to say there's hard evidence. Please.
But getting to the meat and potatoes of what you're describing, being on site when you actually see a track that's stamped into something like the duff of the forest at a 90-degree angle, a couple inches deep, at that point, you're left without question that something with direct pressure has left that undoubtedly large impression.
So something's leaving these tracks.
Yeah.
And this actually is interesting because I don't know what that is. Like, could that be a fake? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You know, I a part of me thinks a little bit, you know, what if the Nephilim are real, right? And these are just Nephilim.
I guess it's also an option. These are just aliens.
These are no, not aliens. Nephilim were human angel hybrids.
Oh, I thought Nephilim were the Anunnaki who bred with humans. I get confused.
I think it depends on who you think angels are. If you believe angels are Anunnaki, then that would make the Nephilim the hybrids of aliens and humans.
Yeah.
If you believe that angels are godlike beings created by God that came down, then the Nephilim are angel human hybrids.
Well, and it's similar with also what you just said.
Either way, they're human hybrids.
Yeah, they're human hybrids. It's so hard to keep track of all these fake alien races. So one of the interesting things about Bigfoot too is, and the reason why I like these guys is because they are a lot more grounded. Like I said, a lot of the people who come on Coast to Coast talk about Bigfoot, the guy I was listening to recently, he knows all about Bigfoot because he psychically communicates with them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So that's how he's figured all this information out and how they're actually an alien race who like crash landed and are hiding from other alien races like the Draconians and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like there's just a lot of wackos out there, and these guys stick at least relatively to facts.
So they're just they're Wookiees.
Yeah, basically they're just Wookiees according to
they're
this
Wookiees that
gentleman.
crash landed on Earth.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take.
It's a take.
It's an interesting.
It counts as a take. Now, when they were going in and talking to, because I think these guys are actually Canadian, because they were using the term First Nations a lot.
Yeah, definitely Canadian.
Yeah, basically, it's really hard to break into First Nations groups and get them to share these stories. So
I would imagine so. It's like one of those things that you think the U.S. government was bad to our Native Americans, dude. The Canadians were somehow worse.
And then you have Tobe and Brett rolling up.
Yeah. Tell us about the Bigfoot.
What's up with the Bigfoot, bro?
What about the Bigfoot First Nations? And they're just like, oh my God, get off of our property.
Get them the hell out of here. But I think they were so genuine, you know, eventually they were able to get them to open up.
Right.
Time to address Sasquatch, whether in fact it took a couple seasons to even bring up the name Sasquatch with this elder. And that's just because of the reverence to the Sasquatch being themselves. So in that case, you know, you have to sit back and just kind of wait.
So they literally waited years, like building relationships with these tribes in order to, you know, get them to open up about Sasquatch. And I was like, man, these guys are dedicated.
No, that's good. That's good ethnography, though. That's classic ethnographers. You really, in the true like sense of the words, you really got to put your time in so that you build trust. And then through that trust, you get the most truthful stories, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think it also helps being able to contextualize the information because you've actually gathered an understanding of the community and the culture behind it. And then it's not just like a random tidbits. It's like, no, I can actually put this in context and then present that narrative to my audience in a cohesive way.
Right. It's helpful to have the whole story and not just the Sasquatch Bigfoot story. Right.
Yeah,
it's like, how does this connect to the tribe, and how does this connect then to the people? And then how does it connect to the culture at large?
Yeah. And it's so much less sensationalized too.
Right.
Which I really appreciate. And that's why I just really like these guys. I'm like, I haven't watched their documentary yet. I need to. But yeah, they're pretty cool dudes. So the other thing they get into is some more of the modern day sightings that have occurred. Right. Okay. And one of the things that really intrigued them to begin with was the actual trauma that was associated with people who had seen Bigfoot.
Really?
Yeah, which is not something I had really thought about.
Some folks that have had post-traumatic stress disorder type symptoms after seeing something that quote unquote does not exist. And so I thought there was something to that.
So people are straight up getting PTSD from it.
Right. Well, dude, I think we talked about this before about seeing these different, alien beings or anything like that, where yeah, dude, it would probably shake you to your core, especially if you're not someone who already kind of believes in conspiracy and paranormal.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing for me is if I saw a UFO, which I still want to see a UFO one day, I don't know if anything like that would happen, but yeah, maybe if I saw a Bigfoot, that, because I mean it's here, it's on the ground, you can see it, it's probably terrifying to see,
right? Yeah,
there's
a horrible smell associated with it.
Yeah,
I mean it would be terrifying. It really would be.
Yeah, and I guess there's a certain like fear for your life on top of this thing that's not supposed to actually exist.
Yeah, I mean, dude, running into a grizzly bear in the wild would give me PTSD.
That would be scary.
Let alone a 8-foot walking hairy being.
Yeah, we did see that bear once, but we were inside a cabin.
Yeah, and it was like a little black bear.
Yeah, it was small.
Which is like essentially a raccoon.
Basically was a raccoon just going through trash cans.
Just going through trash.
Yeah, just a giant raccoon.
It's a giant trash bear, dude.
Yeah. So one of the ways that they help uncover some of the information about the event is actually through hypnotherapists and psychologists. So
that takes away a little bit of their their sheen for sure.
Yeah, this was the one where I was like, all right, this is a little questionable if you are using hypnotherapy to get any of this information out.
Yeah.
And a hypnotherapist, for instance, can go back frame by frame and help that person recall that encounter, recall the details, and they can kind of go backwards and remember what it looked like and how they were feeling, and and that really helps out with the therapy.
Now, Chris, what this is based on, and you may be familiar, some of our listeners may be familiar, but the idea of repressed memories, right?
Right.
Which is the belief that traumatic events are actually stored in your unconscious and then can be brought to light through hypnosis and through a hypnotherapist actually guiding you through the events.
Right.
Now, this has been mainly discredited by pretty much everyone in psychology because of how it's been abused and how it has been shown to basically just make up memories in your brain. So one of the most famous examples was in the 1980s during the Satanic Panic, where hypnotherapists were convincing children that they were being ritually abused by their teachers or by their parents, and a lot of innocent people got thrown into jail because of it.
Well, didn't L. Ron Hubbard use hypnotherapy in the beginning stages of Scientology to figure out like past lives and stuff like that?
I haven't heard that, but it wouldn't shock me.
I'm pretty sure that's right. So hypnotherapy has always been one of those things for me that I've always been highly skeptical of, because again, we talked about this a little bit with our Harlot the Witch, where it's just like, if everyone is a prince or a king or a mighty general warrior. And it's like, no, most of you were peasants living a terrible life, mucking around in horse manure.
Mm-hmm.
That was 99% of us.
Yeah, not everyone can be a pharaoh in their past life, but for some reason, everyone's a pharaoh.
Yeah. There's literally 100 pharaohs.
Yeah, but 6 billion people were a pharaoh for some reason.
Right, exactly.
Well, unless L. Ron Hubbard is right, and we just have a million souls attached to us, and we all have a little bit of that pharaoh soul.
Everyone has a little pharaoh soul in them.
Yeah, so go check out your local Scientology center for some auditing, because who knows?
Get audited. Go get audited, everyone.
Take all my money for your auditing.
maybe you saw a Bigfoot and you've been repressing it, and that audit might help you bring that back up.
Clear that one up. I wonder how many paranormal things come up in audits. That would be pretty cool.
It's an alien religion, so I would imagine that it's actually a decent percentage.
Most of them actually have aliens come up.
Almost all of them have some kind of alien experience.
All right, so when we were talking about, PTSD, hypnotherapy, stuff like that, there's a reason for that, Chris. And it's because seeing Bigfoot is even worse than being on tour in Iraq, apparently.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so pretty severe.
Do we have that?
We have that clip.
Give me that clip.
Yeah, Chad and Austin, great guys. Those are a couple of guys that I think had that kind of borderline PTSD. Now, Austin's a veteran. He served over in Iraq, I believe, and what he experienced in combat was second to what he experienced that day looking across that lake at that Bigfoot.
I would just like to say for our veterans out there that I imagine that there is a wide berth of experiences of those who went to Iraq. If you were like an IT guy, an IT soldier, yeah, you probably had an all right time. But if you're sitting there on the front lines, taking shots, running over IEDs, and like getting captured by terrorists, dude, I'm sorry, there's absolutely zero way that like maybe running into a Sasquatch in the woods would be anything comparable to months of trauma.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, neither of us have ever been to war or in the military or in combat. I just don't really see seeing Bigfoot being worse. Like that's quite the claim. And the way that he phrases it as well is it's worse than the combat that he saw in Iraq. Right. Obviously implying that he did see combat.
Right.
Which I don't know if it's true. Chad and Austin are two buddies who were survivalists. They went out into the forest and they saw a Bigfoot by the lake. So, I don't know exactly what their experiences were, but yeah, I don't quite buy that.
Yeah, that's a little far-fetched for me.
Yeah. But let's get into what Chad and Austin actually saw, which I also just love the names on this show. We got Toby, Brett, we got Chad and Austin. Just a couple white bros seeing Bigfoots, man.
Yeah, just a couple of bros crushing beers.
Just seeing Bigfoot. All right, so what did they actually see?
And what they witnessed, I thought, was so profound because they saw an adult Bigfoot take a child or a juvenile and shield it and protect it when they saw the humans. And for me, that really touched me, and it really touched him. It really touched Chad as a father, and touched Austin. And Austin works with special needs kids,
protecting the baby.
But again, on the off chance that Bigfoot is real, it is more than likely a mammal, right? Mm-hmm. And not just a mammal, it's an ape. Now, having worked on a farm with cows, sheep, chickens, goats, even mother chickens protect their chicks. Female sheep protect their lambs. Mother cows protect their calves. That instinct to protect your young is innate in all beings, you know, and particularly innate in mammals who feed their young through their own bodies. And so that isn't the least bit surprising to me.
My only qualm with this is that doesn't seem very traumatizing.
No, it doesn't seem particularly traumatizing.
Because the Bigfoot wasn't acting aggressive. It was acting defensive over its child from far away.
Well, but it goes to our original conversation about, you know, especially if you are not somebody who is conspiratorial or a believer or into paranormal stuff, that it would be traumatizing having this thing that you've heard of, but you maybe never have given any thought or definitely don't believe in, you know, coming face to face with something that you're like, this is a myth, I think would be somewhat traumatizing.
Yeah. Well, and the big thing too is that they did not want to tell the story, and especially did not want to tell the story on camera.
Yeah, no doubt.
At the same time, you know, they were afraid of the ridicule. They were afraid of what people would say. And so, you know, it took them a while to really come forward, and we really had to kind of coax them in order to come out there and revisit that spot.
Which I totally believe, dude. I probably would not tell anyone either.
No.
Especially if you're kind of like macho survivalist dudes, and then you go home and you're like, y'all, I saw a Bigfoot. Everyone's gonna be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I saw a Bigfoot, and it was more traumatizing than a tour of duty in Iraq.
Yeah. Like that's a lot. That is a lot. Well, the interesting thing too is that they were out there shooting survivalist videos, but they didn't have their cameras on them at the time of the sighting, which goes back to what Tobe was talking about, where it is thought that the reason why it's so difficult to get these creatures on camera is because they can somehow sense cameras, right? They stay really
can like
far away.
sense probably like electromagnetism or something like that.
Yeah, some sort of like EMP situation. They know that it's there and they stay far away. And it's thought that the reason why they were able to see this Sasquatch, specifically when they didn't have their cameras, one of the few times they didn't have their cameras, was because they did not have cameras.
So Bigfoot is like borderline Amish or Mennonite.
Just hates technology.
Just hates electronic technology.
Yeah, maybe the frequency of it just like irritates it somehow. I don't really understand. Like, unless it's smart enough to know that when people take pictures, it proves its existence, and then people would potentially look for it. Like, I don't really understand why it hates the cameras, because it would need to know what the camera is and to be able to relate that to human society and what the implications would be of being caught on camera.
Well, they're just a little bit more forward thinking than most of us are. You know, it's like all the damage 5G radiation is doing to us.
Yeah, well, we all know that's where COVID came from, obviously, Chris.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly, dude. And look, I bet there was no COVID in the Sasquatch community, dude.
Yeah, that's have
very low cancer rates.
High testosterone for sure.
High T all day, dude. And that's because they have shunned electrical outputs.
Yeah. It would make sense.
This is all making a lot of sense to me.
Is this tracking for you?
This is tracking.
All right, so we got a bit of a longer clip here.
Okay.
But it is very interesting, right? So it is the story of a diary entry from the year 1840.
Okay.
From a man named Elkanah Walker, who was a missionary in the Pacific Northwest.
That's a name.
That Elkanah Walker.
Elkanah. You don't hear that one too often anymore.
You don't. It's definitely an 1840 missionary type name.
Yeah.
Elkanah Walker was a missionary from the East Coast. He was from New England, as a matter of fact. And he was kind of stationed, I guess you could call it, up near Spokane, Washington, when he wrote this letter back to a friend of his, another reverend on the East Coast. And then he goes into these accounts that are right out of modern day tales. I mean, he nails all of it. He nails the smell. He nails the foot size. Everything is there. It's eerie. It's very eerie, but the letter, I assure you, is real.
So this letter is allegedly being kept at Yale University in their archives. I haven't validated that, but that's where Tobe says that the letter is. And I actually did find a copy of the letter, Chris, if you'd like me to read it to you. Yeah,
absolutely. I would absolutely love for you to read this to me.
Yeah, track this little.
This is very interesting.
Yeah.
So wait. It's a diary entry, or it's a letter that he wrote to somebody?
I think it was a letter that was stored in a diary. Is what it seems like. But it's written by Elkanah Walker in the year 1840.
Because all I was going to say, especially if it was a diary entry, is that you wouldn't expect this to be read by people, right? And so discussing it in your diary does give it some kind of like, this is a private interaction. And why would you go through the lengths of doing this private thing, right? Like, why would you make that up in a diary entry? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I think that it was stored in a diary, but it was a letter written from this missionary to his missionary buddy. And it's written as if it's being written to someone else.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
All right. So from the entry from 1840 from this missionary in the Pacific Northwest. Bear with me if I trouble you with a little of the superstitious. They believe in a race of giants which inhabit a certain mountain off to the west of us. This mountain is covered with perpetual snow. They, the creatures, inhabit the snow peaks. They hunt and do all their work at night. They are men stealers. They come to the people's lodges at night when the people are asleep and take them and put them under their skins and to their place of abode without even waking. Their track is 1.5 feet long. They steal salmon from Indian nets and then eat them raw, as the bears do. If the people are awake, they always know when they are coming very near by their strong smell, and that is most intolerable. It is not uncommon for them to come in the night and give 3 whistles, and then the stones will begin to hit their houses.
So that's the letter.
That's the letter.
So it doesn't sound like he himself came across the beings. He's just retelling the stories that these Native American tribes have told him.
That is true. So the way that Tobe phrased it, I think, was a bit inaccurate. He is retelling the stories that the local tribesmen had told him about these giants that live in the mountains.
And again, that is not surprising when it comes to Native American tales, dude. I mean, the thing is that though most of them are orally told, they're orally told in like an exact characteristics that can be traced through generations.
Yeah.
You know, the story that I hear today from a Native American medicine man is almost exactly the same story that was told 1,000 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think these stories also do serve to benefit the community in some way, because I almost feel as if it's like keep watch of wild beasts at night type situations.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, you know, how Grimm's fairy tales all, you know, tell kids to behave or they're going to be thrown in an oven. I think that this potentially has a bit of that in it, right? There are things that could come bump in the night, and you need to be watching out for that.
Well, I mean, you know, stay away from large castles in the middle of the night because you will be taken.
Yeah.
You know, our elite have always been into weird murder, sacrifice, sex stuff.
Yeah.
And Grimm told those tales being like, dude, stay away from the castles at night. All right. They will capture your ass.
The English royalty has always been full of pedophiles.
Always full of pedophiles, always doing blood sacrifices. You know, Transylvania, don't go out that way. That's a weird place because you have Vlad the Impaler, you know, killing hundreds of people so he can bathe in their blood.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a bunch of Prince Andrews out there.
Yeah.
All right. So really what we're getting at here, and what Knapp really likes to point out, is that people try and say, this all started with the Patterson-Gimlin film, man, and it's way older.
Right.
This is not a phenomenon that started in 1967 with the Patterson-Gimlin film. This is a phenomenon that started hundreds of years ago with some of the first settlers.
Been here a while. And one of the stories that they call out is Teddy Roosevelt's potential sighting of a Bigfoot, which I also do have the real story for you here. It is a little mischaracterized, but we'll go ahead and listen to how Knapp talks about it. But Teddy Roosevelt is involved in this story.
I'm so excited. I didn't know, dude. I didn't know.
Yeah, I was going to do some research on this one, dude, because they're bringing up some weird stuff.
Teddy's behind every great story of America. So
yeah, aren't any of us shocked that Teddy Roosevelt had a Bigfoot story? Like, honestly,
no, that dude loved the wilderness.
He was badass, man.
Yeah, there are those who like to argue that it's all a product of television and films, that they've created the mythology, and so people see it out there when they're actually just seeing a bear or a moose or something. But these stories have been around a long time all over the world. I remember there's a Teddy Roosevelt encounter somewhere where it sure sounds like it's a Sasquatch that he runs into.
All right, so the Teddy Roosevelt encounter. Okay. This is from Teddy's 1892 book called The Wilderness Hunter.
Okay.
So in this book, Teddy tells the story of another hunter, right, that he had met and who told him this story. So it is secondhand. Teddy Roosevelt did not see a Bigfoot.
Hearsay, dude. Hearsay.
Yes, it is a bit of hearsay, and you know how big fish can get, especially in 1892.
Well, and also among hunters.
Oh yeah, dude. Come on.
Fishermen and hunters are the most notorious tall tale tellers,
dude. And if you're telling it to Teddy Roosevelt, you are making some stuff up, man. I would have done that if I was telling Teddy a story. You have no idea.
That fish is about 4 inches longer than it was in real life, right?
That fish was bigger than my boat.
Yeah.
And you know, so he tells a story about this trapper who's named Bauman, who ran into a very large creature one night. So it's unspecified what the creature looked like, but it was very large and it was dark, and they were trying to trap it. It evaded all of their traps and ended up destroying the campsites. It smelled really bad. It was very hairy. And it was very large. And that's pretty much the extent of the story.
Okay. So like could have been a large grizzly bear or something like that.
Yeah, it could have been for sure. It's kind of undefined what it was, but you know, it could be interpreted to be a Sasquatch, certainly.
Right.
But it was secondhand, and it was some guy telling TR a story. So I don't know how much.
Yeah, and the evading the traps and stuff, it gives you the thought that this is an intelligent creature.
Exactly. It must be really smart.
Right.
And with Bigfoot's being really smart, kind of like what we were talking about, the Bigfoot, you ain't going to see it if it doesn't want you to see it, man.
Right.
I think the point you make in the film, it might be from one of the witnesses one of the female witnesses who said that basically they decide who gets to see them. They allow you to see it, and if they don't want you to see it, you won't. Agree?
Absolutely. And I know Tobe can talk a little bit more about this, but Chad and Austin mentioned this. You know, people say, well, here, you know, you're up there with your cameras doing YouTube survival videos, and you didn't get the Bigfoot on camera. And we go into that, you know, in detail. But in short, they believe that had they had their cameras with them on that bank, on the shore of that lake, that they would not have been seen. Like, it was almost kind of an indoctrination to a certain extent.
Now, the other thing with this is that the Bigfoot can also sense your intentions, apparently. And this is when we get a little more woo-woo with it.
Yeah, that's a little woo-woo, dude. All right, let's hear this part.
All right.
George, there seems to be something with Sasquatch and your intent, a measuring device on what your intent is when you come into the tree line. Not always the tree line, but per se out here in the Pacific Northwest, if you have intention to sneak up or deploy any electronics for that matter, but especially there seems to be a permission slip with cameras, and that's non-negotiable even with the apers in the community. There's something to that.
So basically what they go on to talk about is that you have to have positive intentions of some sort, and then that way the Bigfoots will allow you to see them.
That's kind of an interesting thought. But again, I guess just like evolutionarily speaking, how the hell would that ever come about?
Well, we're going to get into this in a couple clips, but there is a psychic aspect to this as well.
There's okay. All right.
So before we get into the psychic aspect, though, I know what you're asking yourself, Chris. All right. I'm out of the woods, right? Okay. I see a Bigfoot. Who do I even tell?
Yeah. Where do I go once this happens?
Yeah. Well, luckily we got a website for you, Chris. It's called bigfootmap.com.
So this is like going to John Rhodes's website and being like, I came across a reptoid.
It's the exact same thing, but for Bigfoot.
But for Bigfoot. Good.
I wish he had a reptoidmap.com and then it would just be a bunch of pins in only South Carolina. Right. We don't have that.
No, these are just all in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
You can go there and you can read reports. You can file reports with bigfootmap.com. And that's what interests me, is because I feel like when you take a look at a map and you see, and we show this in the film, you see all these dots appear in the map. And, you know, there's different dots for whether it was a track, whether it was a sound, or whether it was a full-blown sighting. But when you see all this data, you have to ask yourself, not every single one of those is something other than a Bigfoot.
So the basic argument being they all can't be fake, man.
Yeah. They're not all fake. They're not all grizzly bears. At least a small percentage of these has to actually be Bigfoot.
Which is an interesting argument. I don't know if I buy it, but It is an argument.
Yeah. Right. If Bigfoot doesn't exist, then yes, they can all be something else.
Yeah, they actually have to all be something else.
Right.
And the thing is, you know, Knapp, Tobe, and Brett talked about this, where it didn't start with the Patterson-Gimlin film. It's been around for a really long time, but I don't think that necessarily removes the possibility that there is cultural influence on these sightings. Right. Where everyone knows what Bigfoot is now, right? And that could inspire people to see something that's not actually there potentially,
right?
Or get people to be more likely to have a bit of a hoax.
And being out in the woods is kind of an interesting experience, especially for people who aren't out in the woods, out in wilderness all the time, right? Like, I remember this one time I went out with a group out in Colorado, and everyone was convinced this thing was like a large moose. And I kept on being like, y'all, it's not moving at all. This is not a moose. And finally, we kept on inching closer and closer. And we finally got close enough, and had some binoculars, and it was a huge log. And I mean, these people are sitting there taking pictures and look at the moose. And it's like, dude, it's not a moose. I'm like, I want to see a moose. I want to believe it's a moose. This is not a moose. And so I always think about that when somebody's like, well, I don't know what I saw out in the wilderness. And it's like, yeah, your mind plays tricks on you out there.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great example. It's like, no, you probably saw a log, bro.
Or whatever, a weird looking, a bear that was on its hind legs, or a weird looking rock and the shadows were moving. I mean, it could have been, it can be any number of things out there, because your mind is literally attempting to put meaning and attempting to put patterns to things that it's seeing, things that it can't explain.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, is that the human brain is pattern seeking. So like you said, it's like we're projecting things onto the world around us, and sometimes it leads to us seeing things that are not there.
We see bears behaving strangely that can't be a bear, that has to be Bigfoot.
Yeah. But sometimes, Chris, it is Bigfoot.
You're right. Sometimes it is Bigfoot.
Sometimes you can start building relationships.
I was going to say, I'm going way too skeptical on this.
What we've traded places. I'm all in on this Bigfoot
You're
stuff.
all in on the Bigfoot, and I'm poking holes in it.
I was not expecting to be this in on Bigfoot, but it's as I listen to this, I'm like, yeah, dude, the prints, man.
What are the footprints?
This is the first time since recording this show that I'm like, yeah, I kind of believe this.
I kind of really believe the Bigfoot theory.
Now, we're going to start getting a little wonky, though. This is where it's going to start losing me a little bit. But having a relationship with a Bigfoot, Chris, entirely possible, right? You can do it.
A woman that we interviewed, Arla Williams, has had a relationship with multiple Bigfoot or Sasquatch for, almost 60 years. I mean, this goes back to her childhood when she was kind of playing outside. She looked up, she saw a hairy little kid. And that hairy little kid was a juvenile Bigfoot. And as it turns out, her grandmother had had some of the same experiences.
So it's a family thing?
What do I get more than that? Is that all I'm getting out of that story?
So she became friends with Bigfoots, Bigfoots, which is both a singular and plural. But one of the ways that she communicates with them is psychically.
Oh, please. This is the part I want to hear.
Basically, Arla is able to do what's called mind speak. And she can communicate with them back and forth, either using, they'll send her words in her head that she'll hear, but it won't be her own voice, her internal voice, or she'll see pictures.
So her relationship with Bigfoot is based on mind speak predominantly.
Okay.
Communicating psychically with the Bigfoot tribe.
Right. Interesting. And this is how Bigfoot communicates with other Bigfoot psychically.
I guess that's not really clarified, but I can only assume that if you are communicating psychically with humans, you're probably doing that with other Bigfoot.
This kind of gives it a little bit more of that angel alien feel, though.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, if they're psychically communicating with each other, with humans, sending you pictures and images in your brain, like that's, pretty alien.
Holy crap, dude. I'm connecting the thoughts here. What if these were the ancient civilization that has survived the apocalypse 10,800 years ago that Graham Hancock was talking about, dude?
I'll tell you, email Graham and see what he thinks.
So, Graham, what if these are Bigfoot? I won't get a response back. I won't get a response
I don't
back.
know if Graham would appreciate that.
No, I don't think Graham would like that idea too much.
Graham, it's Bigfoot. Next time I'll let you know when Graham is going to be on the show again, and we can call it and ask.
We can call it. So, Graham, I'm thinking Bigfoot or Nephilim. Nephilim are alien human hybrids. There was a whole race of Nephilim that created advanced civilization that was wiped out 10,800 years ago. And we still have Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest. But that's the reason they hate technology, is because their technology destroyed them.
Yeah, Graham's not giving you the yes and on that one, man. I love it. I think
you gotta believe me, Graham.
You gotta believe me, man. I can prove it. I have the documents. So now let's get into, I know, Chris, I did promise you that we would talk about some of the gifts that people leave for Bigfoot.
Yeah, I need to know about this.
So let's jump into the gift giving, because that's how you show your love.
Basically what happens is folks will put out any number of things, from food to trinkets to things that have special value or that they know might attract more Bigfoot, like, for instance, marbles are a popular one. And this is something that we get into quite a bit in the second film. And this is something that Tobe can kind of elaborate on, some of his gifting exchanges that he's had.
So what happens is that people go out, and then whenever they feel like they have psychically connected with Bigfoot in some way or emotionally connected, they leave those little gifts, and then they get gifts back.
Oh, so it's like a crow. You start giving like little pieces of bread and stuff to crows. They'll start bringing you money.
Do crows do that?
Oh, dude, you can totally train crows like that.
Really?
Yeah, they'll like pick up little shiny objects. And a lot of the times it's like little pieces of jewelry or coins and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe it's just a crow. Maybe a crow. I think you just debunked this. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what they'll typically get in return, according to Tobe and Brett, is gifts that appear to have been left behind in the forest. So it'll be like a moss-covered compass, that's really dirty and waterlogged. It looks like it's been left out for a long time. So they'll get that left in return for them, or something to that effect. So
right.
The implication being they're found objects by Sasquatch that he or her, I guess, is then bringing to you in exchange for leaving it marbles.
Right. And it's probably going to be things that Sasquatch has no use for. They're probably perfect direction tellers.
Yeah. Why does a Sasquatch need compass? Come on.
They would never need a compass.
No, they know where they are at all times. I mean, they're psychic. Come on. All right. So we do have a caller here, Chris.
Okay.
And this caller has a question. Is Bigfoot extra dimensional?
It has to be.
So there is a phenomenon where Bigfoot tracks are found and they just randomly stop, right? So you're following them for half a mile and then no more tracks out of nowhere. There's nowhere for it to have gone. So
no
what
way.
if they're
That's kind of cool though.
Yeah. What if they're like phasing in and out of our dimension?
Yeah.
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
The whole idea of or question about, is this a purely physical being, or is this a being that has other properties? The usual term is extra-dimensional.
Something in the woods, something in the desert, something that you can't see right in plain sight. It should be, at least. And cameras don't seem to solve the problem. We can go through a list of how this phenomena works, but let's just talk about the footprints in particular, the footprints that go to nowhere. Where do the footprints end? It gets into uncomfortable answers for a lot of people, especially in snow drifts in the middle of prairies when footprints just suddenly stop.
And this is a big thing in the Bigfoot research community, is like, why is it that the footprints just end after you've been following them for a while? And there's a couple different thoughts on it. Some people say that Bigfoot can walk backwards over its own tracks to hide its trail. That's interesting. Kind of like the end of The Shining, when the kid's walking back in the snow. And the other one is they're phasing in and out of our dimension. And those are the two main theories. So
those are the two. No, there's no other theory other than those two.
Those are the only two I ever hear. You usually hear the extra dimensional one, that they're not actually from our dimension.
Well, I would imagine something that lives in the woods that long would know how to cover their track.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. It's interesting.
I mean, there's like trackers who can cover their tracks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, of course, Bigfoot would know how to cover his or her tracks. And it may be like, this is crazy to us, but if you know how to do it, it's probably not actually all that crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it could be something like that. I don't really know. It could, to be a bit of a skeptic, could also be because it's a fake and the tracks need to end somewhere.
They have to end somewhere, right?
You can't keep going. You have to stop at some point.
Yeah.
Well, I think that'll wrap it up for us today, Chris. But I do have one more clip, and it's about how researching Bigfoot, man, it's about the journey.
Yeah.
It's about the journey, maybe, than the destination, but it sounds like you're in it for the long haul regardless, right?
Well, absolutely. On my end, I've been doing it since the mid 2000s, and it comes in waves, and you kind of have to step back from it periodically because of other life calls. But when you start getting goodness on your hands like this, documentary points out, boy, you really step on the gas.
So that was just a nice little way to wrap up. We may never actually find proof of Bigfoot, but it's just such an enjoyable thing to partake in.
Right.
And I appreciate that. And I appreciate these guys, Tobe Johnson and Brett Eichenberger. And if you are interested, you can find their movie on Amazon, apparently.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, add it in the show notes.
But I think we go back to the thing that I particularly like about these two is kind of like the ethnography of Bigfoot, that it's the history of this story, that they went to Native American reservations and Native American storytellers to get these stories for a wider audience. And, I think with this whole coast to coast PM project for you and me, there's something to these stories, right? You may not believe all of them, but there are people that do. And there's a reason why they keep on going, why they keep on existing. And I think a lot of the times it says more about us than it says about the story themselves. And so I think that's one of the things that I really like about Bigfoot, kind of like you were saying, it probably did start out as a story to frighten children, don't go out at night. Don't stray too far away from the tribe. Don't do these certain things, these different taboos, because the Bigfoot's going to get you.
Yeah. And it I don't know. It's just one of those things where clearly people are experiencing something. I don't know exactly what that is, but their approach to discovering what people are experiencing based on a historical narrative and an eyewitness narrative and testimony, as opposed to the heavy reliance on the very obscure paranormal that can happen with people who study Bigfoot. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think it does show something about society at large, these stories that we do, pick up, and the types of cryptids that we do discuss, even if they aren't real, the fact that people do believe them is a story in its own right. That said,
and I'll say this much: as far as the cryptids we discussed, Bigfoot is the easiest one for me to believe in.
Yeah.
I mean, that there could be some kind of member of the Homo genealogy that has somehow remained hidden is more believable than like the Mothman or walking reptiles.
We do have to do a Mothman prophecy at some point, though.
We will have to do a Mothman, dude. Richard Gere was just too good in that movie not to talk about it.
It is a bit more realistic than Mothman collapsing a bridge.
Yeah.
But
or reptiles underneath our planet, like this one out of all the cryptids that I've heard about is the one that makes the most sense to me. And I think the one that I hope is true.
Yeah.
Well, I would love for there to be a human hybrid. That would be incredible.
Yeah. Well, Chris, on a scale of 1 to 5 Bigfoot plaster molds, what do you give our boys Tobe and Brett?
I'm giving it to them. I'm not giving it to the whole Bigfoot mythos, but I'm giving them 4 Bigfoot plaster foots.
Fantastic. I'm going to go even further, Chris. If we are giving it specifically to them, I'm giving them 5 because of how much better they are over anyone else I've ever heard discuss Bigfoot on the show. I think they blew it out of the water.
Yeah, they were great. They were awesome.
Very grounded, very good approach, I would say, to cryptozoology, which a lot of people don't have a good approach to this.
Right.
So I appreciated it.
Yeah, I took one off because they did lose me a little bit with the hypnotherapy.
Yeah, the hypnotherapy, and then also the psychic communication also lost me a little bit. But I think my bar is just so low for people talking about Bigfoot on this show because it's mainly based around psychically speaking to tribes and talking about their entire tribal structure based off of the thoughts in your brain. And I'm like, you may just need medication if you're hearing these voices.
Yes.
But that has been our show about Bigfoot. So thank you ever so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
All conspiracy all the time. Later.